Sergeant First Class Sean Ambriz, who published Ghosts of the Valley in 2000 and I guess it was this year, right? 2020.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Available on Amazon, Kindle. I've got the links in the comments. But tell me, first of all, about what Ghosts of the Valley is, about the book, and about yourself.
Yeah, so, well, I'm originally from Los Angeles, California. I'm 32 years old. I've been married to my wife, Amy, for 9 years. I've been kind of all over the place. I served at Fort Carson, Colorado, Schofield Barracks, Hawaii, Joint Base Lewis McChord, Washington, and now currently I'm serving at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri as the Military Police Senior Leader Course Instructor. Yeah, and since I've been here, I decided to finally kind of put my pen on paper and write this book. And it describes, I mean, it's a story of my experiences in Afghanistan, but it's not really a biography. It's just a story told through my eyes. And I try to just stick with the events that happened, and specifically two major events that happened in Afghanistan.
When were you deployed in Afghanistan?
I was deployed 2009 to 2010, and then 2011 to 2012.
Had you always planned to join the military, join the army? How did it come about that you joined?
I mean, I always kind of wanted to serve. I just didn't know in what capacity. I always, played soldier in the backyard, with my cousins, and with toy guns and stuff like that. So it was always kind of in me to want to go do it. I just didn't think that I actually would. I wanted to be a police officer for LAPD back in LA. But I joined because my girlfriend I was dating at the time, a high school sweetheart, she wanted me to have a more stable job with a long-term plan. So I surprised her in joining the army. And then after I signed the contract, she broke up with me. So I was kind of stuck.
Well, so yeah, you got the army, I guess. So there's that. Tell me about reading the links that you sent me, which I, like I said, included in the description for this video. It sounds like one of the purposes of your work was to discuss not only the stories themselves, but the effects after the fact. PTSD was mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
kind of those challenges. Tell me a bit about that. And was that kind of the main focus, the main purpose behind writing the book, was to encourage soldiers, people involved in those situations, to get assistance with PTSD?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a psychologist or a doctor. I don't know the science behind PTSD and how to heal it and all that stuff. I just kind of know my experience of dealing with it, being diagnosed with it, and trying to fight it. And so my book doesn't paint some crazy picture of, being a problem solver. Like, if you read this book, you'll be PTSD free. All it is really is to show people that they're not alone. It doesn't matter what the trauma is. You didn't need to go through combat. You didn't need to drag a dead body across the battlefield in order to experience PTSD. You go be in a major car accident and never want to be around cars or get in a car or drive in a car. And that's trauma itself. And so it's just to show people that trauma is trauma, and there are after effects to that trauma. And a normal person like me, nobody special, just some brown kid from LA, if I could go and experience some trauma and have those same issues and thoughts as they are, or as the reader does, then, they could feel like they can be resilient and overcome whatever that trauma is.
Yeah, I think with PTSD, I like what you said. I don't know if it's about, I don't know if any book is necessarily about solving it, quote unquote. It's recognizing, like you said, right, that you're not alone in the struggles. Since you published it and started talking about it, have you got some feedback from others who've been experiencing similar traumas or traumas in general? And what is the feedback been?
There has been a few that have reached out and just said that the book, really kind of helped them. Obviously, family members of mine, not realizing some of these events that unfolded was the first time that they had read about it in detail. And then there was just a lot of connection for even those who had never really experienced any major trauma or have deployed or fought in a war, but it really was a good connection because they said it was just very straightforward and raw, to the point. It didn't stray from it. A lot of people, like a lot, have actually said they wish the book was longer. It's kind of a short book, but I just didn't want people to sit on it forever. I just wanted to get straight to the point. And so I think that kind of connected or bridged that gap between combat vets and non-combat vets, the veteran community and the civilian community. And I mean, that's kind of what the whole purpose of it was.
Yeah, I come from the corrections side of the world. I worked at a jail for about 5 years. I was never a correctional officer. I was on the quote unquote program side, or the hugger side, if you want to be some of the terms. But I can say, you know, CEOs, whenever I read anything related to PTSD, I think of correctional officers, because working with those guys, you know, for so many years, 5 years about, it's a tough job. Any law enforcement, but dealing with, you know, possible suicide attempts or suicide completions or the drug overdoses, and you know, whenever you're authority figure in a room full of people who don't like authority figures. So yeah, I think that PTSD is one of those things that, like you discussed, right, can affect so many people in their professions, be it correctional officers, law enforcement, police, car accidents. So have you found that people reaching out to you have been mostly from the military, or has it been, like you said, from an even mix of civilian, military?
No, it's mostly been military right now. I would like to get it out to the law enforcement and other first responders and stuff like that. But I mean, just, you know, I'm a one-man army as far as marketing. You know, using social media to my advantage. I don't have a publishing, or I don't have like a marketing team. I don't have a website. It's merely me just talking to people and trying to spread the word and trying to get feedback as much as I can. So I'd like to hear other first responders' point of view and to see if they enjoyed it, but I just haven't really gotten there yet. So hopefully I will.
I'll share this with some of my my colleagues from uh, the corrections side of
Yeah, I
the world,
appreciate that.
probation officer too. I was even thinking some of the people I worked with, the clients or the inmates suffering from you know, abuse as a child. A lot of, in those cases, would be suffering from PTSD.
Mhm.
But I think your book and the parts of it I was able to read so far, um, yeah, I think there's a lot of valuable information in there for uh, civilians as well as perhaps the military.
Mhm.
Oh, what would you say has helped you the most dealing with PTSD and those experiences?
Having a good circle, you know, family, friends, coworkers who are kind of acceptable to my trauma and kind of listening to me, knowing my triggers, knowing when I'm not okay, when I'm acting different. You know, the veteran community, we're very A-type personality. You know, we tell each other, "Oh, come on, man, don't be a pussy," well, you know, but in all actualities, we really do care about each other, and the suicide rate is an epidemic in our community, and you know, we just want to see us get better and get help. So you know, although we put that front up that we're a bunch of hard asses, you know, there are a bunch of dudes that have reached out and check on me on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, and we try to remain that connection. So it's been good. I think that's been the best thing, just dealing with the trauma, is having people that you could talk to.
Where do you think that front comes from? Because that's something I've always been interested in,
You
even
talking
on
about the
the
A-type personality kind of thing?
sorry.
You talking about like the A-type personality kind of thing?
Well, yeah, I wonder, is it uh, like the don't be a pussy type of
Mhm.
attitude? Do you think that comes from, like, is that the way people expect them to act, so therefore that's how they act, or is that
Yeah, I think naturally, if you look at any military movie, that's kind of what you're going to see, the stereotypical thing. You know, but not all of us are like that. I definitely was not like that growing up. You know, I didn't grow up a vocal leader. I didn't grow up, you know, I don't know. I was more of an emotional kid. I was very emotionally attached to how I felt and things around me and people around me, and I cared about what people thought. I still do. And so I've always been an emotional guy. But the military and leaders of mine when I grew up taught me how to, I don't want to say suppress my feelings like they weren't important, but put them to the side, because that's part of the job description. Um, you know, when you are faced with combat situations, life and death, where especially if you're in a leadership position and others are counting on you to make quality, um, you know, life changing or altering decisions, you need to be on top of your game, and your feelings and your emotions cannot get in the way during those moments. You need to make your head has to be clear. You need to understand how to suppress those feelings and emotions and how to tackle whatever the said problem is in front of you, so that you don't get anyone killed.
Speaking of your experiences in leadership roles in combat situations where you do have to kind of focus on the task at hand and maybe put your feelings to this side, one of the articles you sent me discussed your being the recipient of of numerous awards. What I found so interesting about that, though, is even in the first paragraph that I was reading, you sounded kind of conflicted about receiving them. Like you were proud to receive those awards, but at the same time, you felt like you were just uh, doing your job and weren't necessarily sure how to feel about winning awards for valor in combat. I guess talk about want to talk about not only the awards you received, but how you felt about them kind of at the time you received them, and then also if you still have those same kind of conflicted feelings now, or if you look at them differently.
Um, yeah, no, that's a good question. Yeah, I did not initially understand or like that I was receiving the awards that I did. I was young, 18, 19, 18 years old. I'm being told by my commanding officer that I'm being put in for, these awards. And I just didn't understand it initially because I wasn't the only one on that mountain that day. If I was some crazy Medal of Honor recipient guy who went out and did something heroic by himself, put his life on the line, that's something else. That's why the Medal of Honor recipients receive that award, because they do things like that. I don't think I did anything like that. I did everything I did on both of those battles was as a team, and I definitely on both battles, both occasions, would not have walked out of them alive had it not been for other people. So why was I receiving an award that I didn't do alone? Why am I being the lone recipient of something if I didn't accomplish it by myself? So it was hard to compromise with that. And it was hard to accept that. And of course, when there come awards of that magnitude, there's scrutiny. There's telephone games, there's rumor mill, there's drama and talk. Naturally, humans want to do it. And I hated being the center of attention. I hated feeling so vulnerable and having my information and having some of the worst days I've ever experienced be put on a platter for everyone to talk about. It was hard. It was hard for me to swallow. And it took me probably after a year after my second deployment to really kind of come to terms with it, and not by choice. It had to be done forcefully by a mentor of mine who pretty much told me to shut the fuck up and that I needed to stop acting the way I was acting, because I was kind of acting out of turn. I was acting wrong. I had an attitude problem. I started to not give a shit about my job. I just wanted to get out of the Army. I had a bad taste in my mouth, and I don't know. I don't know why I was acting the way I did. And he very bluntly pretty much told me that there are men that are greater soldiers than him and I that had earned those awards, those same awards, and a lot of them didn't make it home. A lot of them died for those awards. And so every time I bitch about those awards, essentially all I'm doing is shitting on them and their graves and those awards that they earned. And I needed to do a better job at being just I don't know, I guess just an ambassador, a liaison, somebody who can protect those awards with honor and understand that the award is not about what I did during a certain battle, but the award represents what Americans before me have done, and I need to be an ambassador of that and understand that every time I speak of these events, I'm speaking about things that other Americans have done before me, and I definitely didn't do these things alone. So when I tell these stories, I tell them of leadership, and I tell them that this is what I saw, this is what I did, but understand there were a lot of other things going on around me that I would not have been able to accomplish without their help.
Can you talk about those days?
Which one would you like to hear?
Let's start with the one from 2009. Your Medal of Honor Award for valor.
So, I mean, I don't know how much detail you want, but essentially that was a rescue mission that a platoon that we were attached to, a cavalry platoon, was cut off by 3 snipers. And what we didn't know at the time was about additional squads of Taliban fighters. And they were cut off on this mountain. We thought they were 200 meters. It ended up being almost 2,000. And we didn't bring any water, food, or any other medical equipment. It was supposed to have been a quick snatch and grab. And 8 of us volunteered to go up this mountain. And 50 feet into us climbing onto the mountain to go save them, we started receiving contact from the opposite side of the where the village was at. And we took contact all the way up to about the 200-meter mark, found out they were higher up. And then we had to somehow maneuver around this mountain, which was hard because they were up a draw in a mountain. And then we had to, again, I don't know how much detail you want, but
I mean, I'm happy with as much detail as you want to provide. I don't really have any particular time limits on these podcasts.
Yeah, so I mean, so once we started kind of pushing up this mountain, you know, we got into like these cornfields, and we were trying to maneuver around to a better position. And we got up to like the second cornfield. It came over the radio that we had one hero, which is a term for a killed in action American killed that was killed in action. So we found out it was you know, my lieutenant, the lieutenant that we were attached to. And we got up to like the last cornfield. That's when we started realizing that the enemy was closer than we thought, as far as they were trying to cut off our rescue team and the pinned down squads. We started hearing crackling of corn stalks in the cornfield about 25 meters in front of us. Come to find out, it wasn't any Americans. They weren't in the cornfields, and so it was the Taliban. So, you know, we had to throw some frag grenades. There was like a little Vietnam-sized hole they were crawling out of. And it got kind of serious that, you know, that we didn't really know where their enemy was at. And once we got kind of parallel with the casualties, we had to figure out how we were going to run 175 meters in the open and extract the wounded and dead back to safety where we were at. And we were sitting on like this donkey trail, and we had like kind of a wall to conceal us, like a little rock wall. And essentially we had to call in a smoke mission and put the smoke in between the casualties and the snipers. And the snipers knew what we were doing. So as soon as the smoke hit, they just started sporadically shooting through the smoke. And I followed my team leader, Sergeant Keel, and we ran about 75 meters or so. And the first casualty I came across was an Afghan army soldier who he was going into shock pretty good. And I crouched down next to him, and I sat on top of this little boulder straight up in the open. And Sergeant Lee crouched next to me, and he's pulling security off the side. And I noticed that this guy's femur was sticking out of his leg, and the inside of his calf had gotten blown off. I don't know if it was an exit wound or he took shrapnel. I'm not quite sure. And so I started to assess this tourniquet. I put it in a Rayleigh dressing, packed it with gauze, started to get him moving, and that's when they brought my lieutenant's body over. And before I could actually go see my LT, I saw these bloody hands off to my left, and I looked over, and it was Sergeant Russ. And Sergeant Russ was one of the other squad leaders that was there that day. And sorry, my light just turned off. And
yeah, we went dark for a second.
Oh, sorry, I just wasn't sure how dark it was.
No worries, I can still see it fine.
Okay, so yeah, Sergeant Russ was one of the squad leaders, and he was and so he was shot, and so I ran over to him, and when I did, he had like a trail of blood behind him, and I didn't really look at him because I was trying to concentrate where the blood was coming from. I wasn't sure if he had been, you know, medically worked on or anything. So I took a knee next to him, and I saw that he was a big dude, and he had 2 tourniquets on his left leg. And so I noticed one had come undone. So I crouched down. I kind of told him, I'm going to put you in some pain. And I slammed my knee into his femoral artery to stop the bleeding. And I started to tighten down that second tourniquet. And as I did, I could hear him like choking on blood, it sounded like. And so then that's when I looked at his face for the first time, and he had gotten shot in the lower jaw, and it was kind of hanging off, and he was choking on his own blood and his own tongue. So I had to go into his mouth and grab his tongue and pull it off to the side and have him bite down on his tongue so he wouldn't suffocate on himself. And I started to carry him, but I was putting him in more pain because of my smaller stature at the time. You know, I was only 18, so I was 180 pounds, barely went to the gym back then. So it was hard for me to carry him. Corporal Sisto and Sergeant Keel, my other two team leaders, noticed that I was struggling, so they came over and grabbed him from me. And then when they did that, there was nobody to grab LT's body. So I volunteered and said I would grab him. And as I'm pulling him, that's when we started to notice that the smoke was going to clear and that the snipers were going to have a clear shot of us. And we still had 50 meters or so to go. So I dragged LT all the way back to the donkey trail. And that's when we kind of started to reassess the situation, or redistribute, reconsolidate all of our gear and ammo and everything like that. And there were guys that were taking additional gear off the wounded so that they didn't have that burden. I took on 6 additional M4 rifles on my back. And then the plan was essentially that we were going to be split into 3 teams. Myself, First Sergeant, Sergeant Lee, a cavalry scout, and the interpreter were going to be the recon team. And our job was to just find a way down the mountain because the way we had come up was too treacherous for the wounded. And the problem was it was a poor moonlight night, which meant that we didn't have adequate light to use our night vision goggles. And night vision goggles were going out, and we couldn't tell if a cliff in front of us was 3 feet or 30 feet. So we had to kick rocks off to figure out how long it took the rock to fall. And then we realized, okay, we have to go left or right or whatever. And so this was going on. I mean, we weren't really receiving any contact, and things were pretty quiet for the time being. And that's when we were walking down the mountain. We had to been almost halfway down, and I noticed that there was a bright light in between my feet. And we looked back, and one of the Afghan soldiers had gotten, I guess he just got irritated, or he didn't like how slow we were moving or something. So he used his flashlight. And so First Sergeant told me to tell him to go turn it off. And I turned around and I got maybe 2 steps in, and before I could even get any further, our entire world got lit up. All of Saw Village right across from us started to light us up, as well as 2 additional fighting positions. And we just got a huge barrage of enemy fire come in, and I just hit the ground and laid behind this rock wall. I had First Sergeant between my legs, and before I could really do anything, the interpreter collapsed on my body. He got shot in the shoulder. So I started to work on him while he was laying on top of me, and I pushed him off once I was done. And that's when I started to black out, just heat exhaustion, I think, dehydration. And when I started to pass out, I remember hearing First Sergeant yell "broken arrow" over the radio because he was laying right in between my legs. And so for those of you who don't know what broken arrow means, it's essentially a old Vietnam era term that meant that we were on the verge of being completely overran or overwhelmed, and that if we did not receive air assets in time, we were all going to die. And so every air asset in Afghanistan that wasn't currently engaged on mission had to come to our location. And I remember I blacked out, and I don't know how much time had gone by, but when I woke up, I looked up to my right and I saw tracers coming down the sky from a C-130 Spectre gunship, and they were raining down on the adjacent mountain where the rockets were coming in from. And so I looked up to my left, and I saw one of the Afghan soldiers coming down the mountain. And as he did, he got, 2-3 steps in off this boulder, and he looked up and took 2 bullets to the face. And so I tried to roll over and I tried to grab him, but his leg was stuck between 2 boulders. And so I was yelling at the Afghans that they needed to grab him on their way down. And First Sergeant said, he wanted me and Sergeant Lee to recon this route, and he was going to go back up and link with the 3rd group. And so I sat myself up. I looked over the rock wall, and before I could react, I just saw this huge red ball come in. And it was from one of the B-10 enemy B-10 rocket positions, and it slammed in right below the wall. Shrapnel peppered the entire area. Rock wall came down, dislocated my shoulder. And so I kind of slid down this boulder. And when I did, Sergeant Lee accidentally kicked another rock and further dislocated my shoulder, just put it in more pain. I was completely incapacitated at this point. I couldn't move, didn't want to go anywhere. And so, again, I'm the medic. So I was trying to tell him how to pop my shoulder back into place because I couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't carry all this gear and the extra weapons. And so, he's doing this all under fire. And so I'm leaning up against this boulder. He's in between my legs, standing above me, and he's trying to push on it, but with my gear on, he just couldn't do it properly. And so I told him it's probably not the most medically proper way to do it, but use the buttstock of your rifle. And so he took the buttstock and he slammed it in my shoulder repeatedly until it went back into place. And then the pain kind of subsided. As soon as you put a dislocated shoulder back in, it gets you back up on your feet pretty quick. And so me and Sergeant Lee started making our way down, and we were marking the way with chem lights so everyone else could kind of find the way. And then once we got down to the bottom, I linked up with my squad leader. I told him we were the first ones down, and I met up with my boy Patsky. He was at one of the trucks, and he kind of pulled me over and asked me if I was okay and everything. And it's kind of like just kind of BSing with him for a second. And this is, again, all while rounds are still coming by. We don't give a shit. At this point, we did not care. We're standing behind the truck. Enemies shooting at us. Didn't give a fuck. They hit us. And I looked in front of the convoy about 100 meters in front of us. I could see an American walking all by himself. You could tell it was American based off the gear that he was wearing, but it just looked like an outline of a person. There it is. And so I looked as he started to get closer. I could see that his chin strap was open, his vest was all open, and he was literally dragging his rifle on the ground. Like the rifle was just bouncing all over the ground. He didn't give a fuck. He was just dragging this thing. And I noticed it was Corporal Sisto, and he came over and he collapsed in our arms. And I sat him up against the tire weld, and I was checking his body to make sure he wasn't hit. Maybe his adrenaline was going. I didn't see anything, but he had like this look on his face, like this 1,000-yard stare. And I asked him, hey, Corporal, what's going on? Are you good? Like, are you hit? What's going on? And he didn't really answer. And then I asked him, I was like, why the fuck were you way over here? Like, why were you so far ahead to our left? And come to find out, during the initial barrage, the enemy barrage, he had fallen off this cliff edge to our left, and he couldn't get back up to where we were at. And so he had to find his own way down. And in doing so, he said he heard some guys speak in Pashto, and he thought it was the Afghan army guys that were with us, but it was the Taliban, and they were 20, 25 feet away. So he had to ditch his gear and hide between some rocks with his pistol so that he wouldn't get captured or anything like that. So, he was kind of fucked up by that. And so we put him in the truck and everything, and we waited, and we got everyone else down the mountain and stuff. And then we took all the casualties, including myself, to the aid station to get looked at after that. So it was a crazy fucking night.
How do you feel telling that story now versus maybe like immediately after it happened, with, writing the book, with discussing PTSD, things like that? Has your feelings about the story changed? Do you find it easier to talk about now, more difficult? Just how has it changed for you?
Yeah, I mean, it gets easier in time. And that was one thing I did as soon as I got back from the deployment. I started talking to people. I would train my soldiers. I would talk to them. I would tell them of my experience. And so in doing this over and over and over all these years, it's just repetition. It just becomes easier the more you talk about it. So I mean, that's one thing. I can't say it works for everybody, but that's what I would recommend to a trauma victim is you need to talk about it over and over and over. Tell the story, talk to people, and it just kind of just becomes easier, in time.
That'd be my experiences too, just from other people, is, the value of talking about it. And discussing it, right? It's going to not only help yourself, but I'd imagine those stories again would help other people, be they military or a civilian.
Yeah.
When you're experiencing it in the moment, what's going through your mind? I know you talked about how at the start you said, you're trained to kind of put your emotions to the side and focus on the job at hand. So during the time, is it just a matter of thinking, okay, what's the next step, and kind of minimizing everything else down to what do I have to do next? Or
the first big battle, I mean, I was a private. That was the first time I had really experienced anything. And there's no cool guy story to that. I was scared shitless. I mean, I couldn't even lie to you if I tried. Being completely brutally honest, I was scared, but at the same time, I also I wasn't like so fearful that I couldn't act. It was just scared because I didn't know what to expect. And some of these guys, my leaders I were with, they had experienced things like this. They had been to Iraq before. Some of them had been to Afghanistan. So they had seen these things before. Maybe not to this extent. This was kind of a crazy day. This might have been one of their craziest days, but they had at least experienced combat enough to know how to control those emotions. Where I was having doubt. I was like, there's no way we're getting off this mountain without paying a higher price. Someone else is going to get fucking killed by the end of this, in my mind. But my leaders consistently had just this demeanor that shit ain't going to happen. Like, we're getting people off this fucking mountain. And they were very confident about that. And they didn't know what the next step was, but they just acted upon it. And so that was one thing I took away from that day. Everything that happened on that mountain that day built my leadership blocks and is the foundation of who I am today. And so when I found myself in my second deployment and I was the leader, I was the sergeant, and I had 3 soldiers underneath me that I had to take care of, every time a decision like that had to be made in combat, I initially thought of my NCOs on that day in September of 2009. What would they do? I always put myself back in that position, but I put myself in their shoes at that point in time.
One thing this is just my experience with military personnel, but I always thought it was really, really interesting. I don't know if you have any comments on it. Is you can't tell, but I'm in a wheelchair, and I don't have a car, so I get a lot of rides to places, or taxis, or Ubers, or whatever it is. And normally, what I've noticed is whenever somebody's put in my wheelchair, it seems like a little thing. Whenever somebody's giving me a ride, or they're putting my wheelchair in the back of their car, 90% of the time they'll grab it by the back wheels. So when it lifts, it swings on its axles and always hits them in the shins, right? Except like 10% of the time, or maybe even less, 5 to 10, the person would look at it and then pick it up by the front and the back, like in a safer way. Mm-hmm. And I was always curious as to what was going on. So I just was asking questions. And I found out everybody who I asked who picked the chair up in like the safer way had some type of military experience, which I always thought was kind of interesting. Do you think that that's a matter of like the training, teaching people to think before they act? Or because I think there's such a weird misconception amongst people that people in the military, aren't good at independent thinking or don't think for themselves. But that's one example of people in the military. That's just a small example of people in the military taking their time and doing things correctly, whereas so many other people, pick my wheelchair up just haphazardly and get bruised shins from the result. I don't know if you have any comments on that. It's just something I noticed. I always thought was really interesting.
No, I think the military, no matter what branch that is, I think it produces some of the greatest leaders this country has to offer. And I think the military does that because of the missions that they put us in. Sometimes they're difficult, and, the missions create moments of indecisiveness that require us to be decisive. And it's little things like that. Like the first thing I thought of immediately goes straight to our basic training, just attention to detail, just small things. And we do that on a daily basis. And some of these younger soldiers that they don't have the experience that I do, or some of these other senior leaders do yet, but these younger soldiers don't even realize how big their skill set is of attention to detail, just because that's what's been bred in their brain, just straight from basic training or boot camp. I think attention to detail is a big one. And I think always having a plan. And, I don't know the exact quote, but General Mattis said it best, just always have a plan, or when it's kind of like when you walk into a room, know your situation, but always have a plan to kill every person you meet. It's not meant to be a deadly threat thing. It's just that, even if my wife takes me somewhere, we go somewhere, I meet new people, even if it's in a safe house, nowhere crazy, I'm always thinking when we're walking up to the house, where's my last piece of cover and concealment? I do it every 5-10 feet. And it's just naturally, I don't tell myself in my mind, I just look and I see it. If something happened right now, an earthquake, a lightning strike, a gun shooting, literally anything that's hazardous to me and whoever I'm with, where do I go right now? To that car, to that wall, behind that trash can? What do I use cover over my head? Where's the best lighting? What do I have around me to pick up as a weapon? And it literally happens seconds, nanoseconds. It's not like I'm thinking it naturally. It's just, I don't know. It's hard to explain, but people in the military do this, you know, and then when you meet people, have a plan to kill them. You know, doesn't matter how much you know them. Like, it's just the way it is. It's just how we're kind of bred. And so that goes down to the attention of detail. You know, it's not that we are, I don't want to say that we're not killers, because yeah, we should be. It's what we do for our country. No matter your job, you should have a basic understanding of how to kill. But you know, it's for the greater good. It's for protection of American citizens. You know, so it's not like we have a bunch of murderers.
No, no, I like that attention to detail, right? That just goes to my story of the wheelchair, right? That most people don't think about the detail of how, you know, a chair rolls on its axles, and if you pick it up the wrong way, you're going to have. But military guys always seem to catch that and pick it up in a safe way. So I thought that was kind of an interesting commonality I found. That attention to detail aspect, I mean, I'd assume that just comes from the necessity of it in a battle situation. If you're not paying attention to details, are what can keep you alive in combat. I would assume is kind of where that comes from.
Yep.
But then, you know, that skill set, and you talked about with your young soldiers, that's going to be, I would think, one of the things that would set the military personnel apart when they return to quote unquote civilian life, are looking for jobs or for work in civilian fields, is they're used to high stakes, they're used to details, and paying attention to them. Have you found a lot of those skills have been transferable in the
a lot of leadership
civilian world?
management positions, you know, taking patterns analysis, understanding just this kind of bigger picture. I think that, you know, is something that most military folks can do. Understanding inventory, understanding price of inventory, and taking care of equipment, and just things like that. Neediness, you know, cleaning things up, having a neat work area, how to prioritize. I think these are all just basic things that we do on a daily basis that makes us good competitors for the workforce.
I know what the words mean separately, but I'm curious, in the military context, you use the phrase pattern analysis. Can you talk about that? Because that sounds like a really cool concept. I have a feeling I know what it means, but from a military perspective.
Yeah. So, I mean, from a combat perspective, pattern analysis would essentially be if, you know, I'm in, well, we have this thing called like the talk, right? It's like the headquarters, essentially, like on the base. And as units go out into sector and they go out into battle, whatever it is that they're doing, just basic patrolling, essentially, I keep track of everything that happens back at the headquarters. And if you look at if you look at a clock in a 24-hour manner, essentially I would mark the time and what happened, and I have like a little key, you know, maybe a circle is a bomb, maybe a square is small arms fire, maybe, I don't know, triangle is a burglary, whatever the case may be. And I just keep track of all these different things that happen in a 24-hour basis, and I do that for a week. And then within a week, I'm going to be able to know, for bombing, what time are bombings relatively happen every day, it seems like. And then I could create a pattern analysis, and I could almost anticipate what the enemy is going to do before they do it. And then that allows me to counterattack whatever the enemy is going to do. But pattern analysis doesn't have to just be used in combat. It can almost be used for anything, really, in that same manner.
I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier on, which is there's an epidemic of suicide right now going on. Have you found that I mean, we're experiencing the same thing in Canada as you're in the States, obviously with COVID-19. We're seeing an increase in substance use and suicides and depression. Have you found that from the military perspective, has the situation, like, has COVID-19 exacerbated these things, or is it just due to the stresses that people are facing? Has it just been a standard problem?
I don't think COVID's been a thing for us. You know, ever since COVID happened, our numbers haven't changed. They've just been steadily sustaining themselves, you know, because while most people in the workforce have been able to stay home, most of our people are still, and they're still out there putting foot to ass. You got people still in Iraq and Afghanistan. They couldn't come home when COVID kicked off. They stayed in Iraq and Afghanistan. They still kept doing their job. You know, people were still going to the field. Still got military police working the gates. roaming the patrol base, or excuse me, roaming the installations and ensuring that the safety was there. You still had people conducting all the administrative work. So for us, the work didn't stop during COVID like everyone else did. And so there wasn't like an added stress factor really, in that manner. I think our suicide rate has just kind of stayed the same.
So what do you think accounts for that epidemic of suicide that you talked about earlier? Is it
Our op tempo. I mean, we're just always on the go, and rightfully so. That's our fucking job. I don't want to bitch and say, "Oh no, this needs to be a softer army. You need to take care of us more." It's just, we got guys and girls that just go go go. They move from duty station to duty station. They go to a school to another school. They are constantly working. Sometimes, there's no such thing as overtime. They can make you work 20 hours, 24 hours, whatever the case may be. Go home, get a few hours of sleep, come back, let's do it again. Like it's a lot of stress on a lot of these soldiers and leaders. How many as a manager in a major department for like a Walmart, how many people do they have to take care of? 50, maybe. I mean, you got sergeant majors, first sergeants out here that take care of 170 to 500, 600 soldiers and all their families. It's not just soldiers; you got to take care of the families as well. And so it's a lot of stress on these leaders. And then you add deployments and field cycles and rotations and all these other different training events. It's nonstop for some of these people. And then, you have the combat veterans who go and do these things downrange, come back home, and this shit don't end. And so it's sometimes just easier to take your own life, it feels like, than get help. And so, do I think we can improve the resources and the stigma for the suicide rate? Yeah, of course. But it's not like the military is not trying. I'm not saying the Army is not doing anything. The Army is. The Army has dedicated things and structures and systems and people to help prevent these things, but it also takes good leaders. It's not just the Army's fault. It's young junior leaders, senior leaders that need to understand their soldiers to the fullest when they're triggered, when they're acting different, asking the right questions, ensuring that money is okay, that family is okay. Like it's more things outside the job. A manager at Walmart don't need to worry about his coworkers and their families. Hey, did you show up to work today? Cool. Go to aisle 7 and clean it. That's all he has to do. Me, as a platoon sergeant, I got 42 soldiers I got to worry about and their families. I need to worry about his finances or her finances, what they're buying, any major expenses. I need to worry about if their spouse has a job. Do they have someone to take care of their kid? Can they get to work? What happens when this guy goes to the field and it's a single mom that's a soldier? What happens to the kid? Who takes care of the kid? Like I have to know all of their finances, all of their plans, all of their emotional statuses, get them taken care of. And that's every single one of them. And that's just me as a platoon sergeant with 42 kids under me. You add more and more rank to that. That's more and more people underneath you. So it's just non-stop stress. It's one of those stressless jobs in the world. But that's also what makes us some of the greatest leaders in the world, because we understand how to do these things and juggle so many different balls. So, it is amazing when you sit back and look at what our leaders in the Army have to do. It's just amazing the kind of people that we have.
I like what you said there, because it's clear that that you care, and that you care about your people. I think maybe one of the biggest misconceptions we have about the military, outside of I talked about, one misconception is often that they don't think independently, they just take orders. The other big misconception, I think, for a lot of people in the military or a lot of people have about the military, is that they're uncaring, or it's just about. But clearly, in what you said there, you care a lot about the people under you, the people around you, right? I think it sounds like a big part of being in the military is caring for your troops, for your fellow soldiers. It's just, that seems to me that something I got from that particularly is how much you care for everybody in the Army.
Well, it's not just me. It's our senior leaders in the Pentagon that are preaching this right now. It's a big thing that's going on. They've been saying that the people are the most important resource that the Army has. Without the people, the mission ain't getting done without them. If you don't take care of these soldiers, if you don't take care of the families, you can't assault any objective, no matter if that's in a combat environment or in a garrison environment back home. You won't get anything done if you don't take care of the people and their families. So that's got to be our number one priority, is taking care of these soldiers.
And I loved the way you talked about taking care of them, because you didn't just talk about it in terms of, and this is something I never would have thought of without this interview. You didn't talk about it in terms of caring for them in the sense of just purely their physical well-being on the battlefield, but their families, their expenses, their finances, right? That's just stuff I never would have thought of would be of concern to a sergeant or leadership. But it sounds like that's something that you really do think about, which is really interesting to
Yeah.
me.
I think all leaders in the military do. I mean, all sergeants, officers, commissioned officers, we all think of this. And I don't want to use the term mom and dad, but to dumb it down, we essentially have to know everything about these kids, about these soldiers, as if we were mom and dad. You know, personal life, mental, physical, just social, everything. We have to know all of it about them in order for us to properly take care of them. Because if we don't, that'll lead to insufficient soldiers who aren't mentally there and prepared to go into combat. And they have to be 100% mentally in order to execute those missions downrange.
This is a Masonic podcast, so I do want to ask quickly. I know I live in Windsor, Ontario right now, but I grew up in Winnipeg, and my dad is a Freemason out there. And one thing that he was involved in, I'm not sure, did you ever see like the Masonic symbol, the square and compasses
Yeah, I've
over?
seen it over the years. A buddy of mine tried to get me into it some years back, and I kind of keep my eye out. You just kind of notice it after a while, not just the lodges, but on people's cars and notebooks and things like that. People who are a part of it and stuff like that. So yeah.
Did you ever see it in with any your fellow soldiers in Afghanistan? Because I know that.
Not Afghanistan. We can't take too many personal items over there. Um, I have seen soldiers, you know, in a garrison environment back home, but yeah, downrange, you just, besides family of pictures, you rarely take a lot of personal items over there. You don't want to leave things over there. You don't want things to get captured, taken, and plus you have to worry about more of your gear being taken over there.
One thing, I don't know if you have any thoughts on this, or if you think there could be a connection, is kind of the two quote unquote golden ages of Freemasonry, the times when membership was at its highest, was the early 1920s and the late 40s, early 50s. And there was a lot of membership coming from veterans who returned from the First and Second World Wars. Actually, a neat side note, the reason I can be a Mason, even though I'm in a wheelchair and missing my feet above the knee, is because originally, to be a Freemason, you had to be a whole person, you had to have all four limbs. And that was changed after World War I in response to veterans trying to join Masonic lodges who had lost limbs overseas. But does it, I guess, do you have any thoughts about what might, I know you're not a Mason yourself, but what might attract so many veterans
Yeah, it's
after the
easy.
First and Second World Wars?
Yeah, it's
Sorry?
easy. It's brotherhood, plain and simple. Plain and simple. Even today in the 20th 21st century, you know, going to Afghanistan, coming back, one of the first thoughts you have is, where are my friends? You know, we all go our own ways after we come back, and we go. Some of us PCS for different duty stations. We have families, wives, husbands, daughters, sons, and they go off and spend time with their families, rightfully so. But we're used to being around them for, you know, a year at a time, nonstop in Afghanistan and Iraq. And when you don't have them around you anymore, you miss that brotherhood. You miss hanging out with your buddies and you know, putting foot to ass for America on a daily basis. And when you're no longer around that, you almost feel like you lose purpose in life. And so a lot of veterans seek these different type of organizations and clubs because they want to be whole again and have somebody they can rely on and have that brotherhood.
And do you think that can assist with uh, either PTSD, if it's been diagnosed, or even just the stresses of
Yeah,
those
of course.
memories and those challenges?
Of course, yeah, especially if you trust a person well enough to want to talk to them about some of those things.
So this seems like a good place to end it, but I do want to ask you one more time, if you could just go through how to go about finding your book, Ghosts of the
Yeah.
Valley. I will, like I said, include the Amazon link in the description. but I know you mentioned it's available on Kindle and audio will be coming out soon. So
Yep. Yeah, so they can find it on Amazon. Again, it's titled Ghost of the Valley. It's on Nook and Kindle for the digital platforms, and then hopefully mid-December or sooner we'll have the audio book out as well, which is it's gonna be a little different. It's dual narrated, so my publisher paid for somebody to read the book. They have like one of those nice professional voices, and as you actually read my book, if you're like looking at say the hard copy, as you're reading the story, there's sometimes the story stops and there's almost italicized lettering and verbiage, and it's actually my internal thoughts. So like you'll be in the middle of a battle and you actually see my internal thoughts as I'm thinking of in that moment. And so I actually went to a local recording studio, recorded all that, sent that to the guy who's recording the book. And so you'll hear dual narrating. The guy is going to read the events that are unfolding in these battles, and as my internal thoughts kick in my own head, you'll hear my own voice come in over the audio. So it's something different we're trying, but hopefully, it'll work. And if people want more information, they can find me on Facebook, Sean Tobias Ambriz. The book has its own Facebook page, Ghost of the Valley, and I'm on Instagram a lot. And my Instagram handle is chief_pink mist. I partner up with a lot of veteran groups, businesses. I try to promote them, get them out there, and do a lot of giveaways and stuff like that as well.
I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. I found you through Facebook, and I appreciate you taking the time. It's really, really kind of you.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. Thank you.